guys. I just wanted to talk today about this. Well, today is 9/11, and I felt I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about my feelings about um, 9/11 and where the country is today, having gone through all that and being old enough to remember the events of 9/11. I, I'm pretty much, I was born in 91, so I'm pretty much peak age to, sure, kids older than me could remember it probably better than I could. I was, at the time, just 10 years old on the day of 9/11, and yeah, it was pretty impactful. Not so much at the time. I wouldn't say I really understood it all that well, but um, personally, 9/11 did affect me as I got older, and the more I started to think about it, it did affect me and affected a lot of people, of course. And having lived in New York and having been to Ground Zero many times, I even on 9/11, it gives you a kind of sense of how we still are living in a lot of ways in the world of 9/11, but we're living in what you might call kind of a post-truth society, and a lot of that comes to the fact that we've never really gotten the full scoop on what occurred on 9/11. What I mean by that is, in the best context I can put it in is that we were fed a narrative about what happened on 9/11, and as far as I know, the narrative holds somewhat true, at least as far as the 16 or 17 hijackers that on the morning of 9/11, um, I believe this was I believe it by between 8 and 9 a.m. on 9/11, the two planes struck the World Trade Centers. I, I, I don't remember the exact order. I know, of course, that it was four different planes that were hijacked, and three of them reached their intended target. Two of those targets were the North and South Trade Centers of New York City, the World Trade Centers in New York City. The third one was the Pentagon in D.C., and the fourth plane, I'm not sure where that one was intended to strike, but that one crashed in Pennsylvania. And the flight path of the fourth plane actually flew over northwest Ohio, so kind of very possibly right over where I grew up. So, but the events of 9/11 didn't really set in at that time, but we live in what you might call a post-truth kind of society where we're not really fed the full scoop on a variety of issues, and a comparable situation, very different situations, but a comparable situation would be with COVID, and how um, the public really hasn't been given the full scoop on COVID, and it's very much the same with 9/11, and we have a situation today where, well, it really wasn't that recent. It really wasn't that long ago that the FBI had released a series of documents that proved that the FBI had been keeping tabs on communications between four of the so 4 of the hijackers out of like the 16, 17 hijackers were um, in direct communication and receiving financial support from the Saudi Arabian embassy in D.C. and I was able to was keeping track of that um, and giving them the benefit of the doubt. The FBI, and when I say that, I mean who knows the full extent of what the FBI that their involvement was, but let's just say for the sake of argument that the FBI was just doing their job and keeping up on these people, and then didn't really go anywhere with it, and didn't do more than keep tabs on these guys. It sure is fascinating that the FBI kept this all a secret for a substantial amount of time, about 20 years, before the FBI finally disclosed information saying that, yes, we do have proof that the Saudi Arabians were not only... People had known for some time that Saudi Arabia had involvement in 9/11, but nobody really knew to the extent that the FBI did, just that Saudi Arabia was in communication with these 4 hijackers out of the 17 hijackers. So, and providing them with financial support and giving them a place to live, and there were meetings held involving the Saudi embassy and what turned out to be some of those hijackers. I believe they were living in like San Diego at the time. It's been a while. I did a video about it about 2 years ago, but when I had first heard about the FBI and their knowledge of what happened, and so of course this is something that the public is not well aware of. It's not talked about much. We have some idea of what happened on 9/11, but of course it would have been nice to hear a little bit more. It would have been nice to hear a little bit more about what Saudi Arabia's involvement was in 9/11. Of course, Osama bin Laden was Saudi royalty, and we had a history of sending him the United States under the Mujahideen. When before he controlled Al Qaeda and was the head of Al Qaeda, bin Laden was in charge of the Mujahideen, and that was also in Afghanistan. But this was back in the 1980s when he was in insurgency against the Russians, and we sent a good deal of material support for the Mujahideen against the Russians, and then that group grew into Al Qaeda, and since 9/11, once ISIS came, so some of this information would have been nice to know about. The information about how involved Saudi Arabia was in 9/11 would have been nice to know before we went and invaded Afghanistan, and certainly before we went on to invade Iraq. But a series of lies by our government, in particular the Bush administration, got us involved in Iraq, and we're still involved in Iraq to this day, and so we've also been involved in providing material support for Al Qaeda again, because I believe it's Al Qaeda that was. It's a complicated situation. I don't fully understand it, but we've been supporting either I believe both Al Qaeda and ISIS in their war against the Syrian government. So the idea that this is a and this is 10 years old now. This is a long time ago. But the Syrian civil war was really more of a coup attempt involving us sending material support to terrorist groups like Al Qaeda and ISIS um, to fight the Syrian government, and for geopolitical reasons we continue to support them. So, and these are situations that are not talked about much, and the American public is just so in the dark about these events, and it's very unfortunate because media, of course, is involved in this cover up because they don't. I mean, they're complicit to an extent too, and we're not given the full scoop by anyone, um, and it's very unfortunate. And I think to this day, it's 23 years later, we still don't have a very clear idea of what happened on 9/11 besides the events of the World Trade Centers and the Pentagon being struck by airplanes and then them collapsing, and the subsequent wars that we got involved in Afghanistan and Iraq, and what went on to be all these other countries: Libya, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, all of these other countries that we got involved in across the Middle East and continue to this day. And now we just live in a state of perpetual shadow wars across the Middle East and Africa too. And we're just not given the information that we deserve as the public, and we're just involved in these perpetual wars that never end. And that's what I think of when I think of 9/11, is just the impact of the perpetual wars we're in the Middle East, the growing power of the deep state, the intelligence agencies,